I keep getting calls from like Morgan Stanley wanting to invest, my portfolio, and I tell them to focus on the other 39 of the 40 on that list. They snuck me in. So thanks for this opportunity. So I'm going to make a somewhat odd proposition, which is that this all comes down to our feelings about nature versus nurture and Voltaire. I'll explain. So I've been thinking a lot about nature versus nurture. I think maybe it's the gays in the military conversation happening again, or, women in science. Larry Summers isn't here, right? That's not, okay. And I've been thinking about nature versus nurture as a debate that's really true and relevant when it comes to our economy. For the right, our economy, it's nature. Globalization, it's nature. The world is flat, after all. Millionaires, more millionaires than ever, nature. Concentration of wealth at the top, nature. Exorbitant CEO pay, that's just what happens. Only 12% of Americans in labor unions, nature. 47 million without health insurance. The share of the GDP going to wages and salaries, the smallest in the 77 years since they've started collecting the data. That's just nature. But it's not nature, is it? It's not nature, is it? Thank you. We know that the fact that the social contract was obliterated and more risk being borne by us. Exit polling from the midterm elections showing Americans thinking that the next generation, their children, would not do as well as they did. That's not nature. We have a choice. Public policy can make our nation fairer, or it won't. But it's a choice. It's not nature. An example, which Bob referred to, is our country's middle class. It's the best lens through which to look at the failure of the right when it comes to our economy. I was doing an interview earlier and I was talking about, about the middle class and how we need to strengthen the middle class, and he said, well, isn't that social engineering? It's a fair question. Damn straight it's engineering. That's the point of government. That's the point, is that we're supposed to engineer fairness and equity. The middle class wasn't some naturally occurring phenomenon. We created it. We created it through unions. We created it through a commitment to, okay. We created it through a commitment to middle class housing, to access to higher education. Today, they found that car that they had buried. Like, you can put the middle class in a time capsule, and we'll dig it up in a few years. The right has finally managed to do something that we haven't been able to do: unite the poor and the middle class. So thank you. Thanks. That was okay. So the middle class. That was a good laugh. I don't, that's my dad. The creation of the middle class is the best evidence for a governing ideology. And I say ideology, and I'm not going to run from ideology. It is the best evidence of what we mean when we say we're progressives, and it's the best evidence of the failure of a conservative ideology. And the demise is real. 65% of Americans think that when it comes to their financial future, no one's looking out for them. 40% of working-age, middle-income people went without health insurance for at least part of the year in 2005. 3 out of 10 haven't saved at all for retirement. Half of workers have no employer-sponsored retirement. Middle class is squeezed as tuition has increased 35% over the last 5 years for an average public 4-year school. The issues of access to education, healthcare, job stability, retirement security, they're no longer issues of the poor. They're the issues of everyone but the very wealthy. This is an indictment, but it's also an opportunity. Bob told me to be positive, so this is where I switch into that. I told him I'm from New York, so that, The Employee Free Choice Act is our opportunity. We can stop undermining middle-class wages and conditions by offering legal status to 12 million undocumented immigrants in this country. We can reform a bankruptcy bill that far too many Democrats voted for. That means that a health crisis or job loss is the end. We can push not just for universal health insurance, but also paid sick leave, paid family leave. And we can try to push for tuition to be as low as possible instead of tinkering around on the margins of excuses for grants for students who can't afford to go to school. Okay, Voltaire. So I think this all comes down to two choices. Either you believe, as Voltaire said, that the best is the enemy of the good, or you believe what my dad told me in junior high school, which is that the good is the enemy of the best. I vote with my dad. Are we going to settle for the good? when it comes to our economic policy? Are we going to work in silos, do healthcare one day, energy policy the next day, maybe we'll talk about taxes on Thursday? Or are we going to get to the core questions, the essential questions that must be a part of any of those debates? And I think they are two. What is the role of corporate power in this country? And what's the role of government in our country? And I encourage you all throughout this conference to ask yourself in these panels, and I will try to do the same, are we getting to the core questions? When we talk about immigration, are we talking about the role of industry that wants as many workers here as possible to exploit and pretends that it's in our best interest? Us, the advocates, us progressives. How many of you heard about the judge with the pants? Okay. You know, are we going to talk about the role of corporate power in dismantling our civil justice system so that almost everybody knows about this judge who sued the dry cleaners about his pants, but we all don't know about the extent to which tort reform is funded by the very industries that don't want to be held accountable? I mean, I'm not saying he should have sued about the pants. I'm just saying that that's a point, that we should be able to hold corporations and powerful entities accountable. Let the jury decide. We're not going to get to the best with a policy of mandatory 401ks, tax cuts, school uniforms. We're not going to get there pretending like we're Lou Dobbs talking about border control, border control, border control, because we're too afraid to tackle our role in the trade policies that created this immigration crisis in the first place. And we're definitely not going to get there talking about tax relief in the language that they have offered us. We need to trust that the American people are going to get it, and I think that is our opportunity. So to end optimistically, the midterms, I'm trying. The midterms, hey, we all wouldn't do this work if we weren't optimistic, right? The midterms were not only about the war. They were about profound economic anxiety and an anxiousness for government to do more. That's where we come in. The urgency is great. And I think if we hold true to our progressive ideologies when it comes to formulating our country's economic policy, when we aim for the best instead of the good, I think we can offer this country something. Thank you.